everyone, I'm Anthropomantic Fiend, and I do horror-related things on the internet. I look a little bit different today because I'm not wearing my sunglasses because I'm gonna be reading again, and because I'm not wearing a black t-shirt today. I'm wearing my Keep Calm and Don't Blink t-shirt because Doctor Who is awesome, and I'm wearing black everything else, so it all kind of balances out. I am doing another Rotten Recommendations thing, which is me recommending you stuff based on what I have and basically giving myself an excuse to show off my collection of stuff, mostly books. This time, I was inspired by a video that Mark of Horror did. Check out his channel, I will link that below. It was a whole video. He picked up a bunch of movies, but he also picked up an issue of the Hammer Horror magazine. I was like, oh, I have that issue. I realized that I have a ton of monster magazines that I haven't read in forever, as well as some horror comics, so I'm going to be going through those. I'm not actually subscribed to any of these magazines right now. These are things that I've bought at comic book stores, horror conventions, things friends have gotten me. I really want to be subscribed to some of these, and I suggest that you do too. This is an issue of Fangoria magazine that I got at a local comic book store. 1991. Obviously, this issue in particular caught my eye because you've got the Addams Family up here, and then you've got a little thing on shock rock down here, and I love horror and music. It's one of my favorite things in the world. And you've got Clive Barker Talks up here, and then you've got Freddy's Dead with Lisa Zane, who I was just talking about in my review of The Nurse. And then you've got Freddy here on the back with a big ad for the Freddy's Dead telephone game. Identify former victims and you could be part of Freddy's estate. I haven't actually looked at this. Oh, and the Freddy's Dead soundtrack was on Metal Blade. I haven't looked in this forever. I'm learning new things already. Anyway, I could just go through this one magazine and just talk about everything, but I'm just gonna focus on the highlights. So you've got an ad for Terminator Judgment Day. This big Nightmare on Elm Street Scream Greats poster in there, which I refuse to tear out because I don't want to ruin the beautiful cover. I love all the ads in this thing too. Just look at this beautiful page of things. Look at that. Famous monsters, Clive Barker t-shirts, Living Dead related things. It's just all wonderful. And you've got this ad for the Weekend of Horrors with Elvira and Clive Barker and a bunch of other people. I picked this up because I was interested in this shock rock thing, which turned out to be a book about like horror and music, like an anthology book of horror stories related to music, which wasn't really what I was looking for, but it's still cool, so that's what that is. It like has a list of horror videos that are currently available. I saw one of the Toxic Avenger movies is in there. Killer Nerd, A Sundown, The Vampire in Retreat, Scanners 2, The New Order, Silent Night, Deadly Night 5, The Toymaker, interview with Herman Cohen about how to make a teenage monster movie on the like I Was a Teenage Werewolf, etc. type movies. It's done by Tom Weaver, who I think did like a bunch of books of interviews with people who were in like B movies from the 50s. I loved those. I met him at a convention when he did like a monster movie trivia thing, and it was very awkward and I got most of the questions wrong, but he was there. I think, unless I'm thinking of somebody else, but I'm pretty sure I know what I'm talking about. I hope I know what I'm talking about. Craven Images. Wes Craven is one director who seems at his happiest when directing his darkest films. He's awesome, as we all know. Free Jack, which stars Mick Jagger. I've never seen this. I don't really know much about it, but I'm intrigued. This wonderful, wonderful interview with Clive Barker, Endless Imagination, talking about Imagica, among numerous other things that he's done. Some stuff from Nightbreed, and this is going to be a long video. Cool videos. That is an awesome movie. Madhouse with Vincent Price. Please watch that. Some stuff about the Addams Family movie, which we all know is amazing. More of that. Nightmare Solo Scripter about the singular screenwriter on some of the Nightmare on Elm Street sequels. Nightmare Library, all kinds of cool horror books being recommended. Imagica is in there with Clive Barker again. Besides some ads, that's about it for that. I don't own any other issues of Fangoria, but I love this one. I haven't read it in a long time, but I want to go back and read all of these. Yes, Fangoria from 1991. Awesome. And here is a magazine that I bought at a horror convention, the Monster Bash convention, which is the one I mentioned earlier. It's the only horror convention I've ever been to, and I want to go back and I want to go to others, but I bought this issue of Diabolique there, and during like a lights out horror radio thing where they turned the lights out in the room, I, like an idiot, put it under my chair, and when the lights came back on, it was gone, so I rebought this. I had to get it because it's the dark side of rock and roll, and there's Alice Cooper and Rob Zombie, and I think that's Poison Ivy from The Cramps, and Kirk Hammett, and I think that's Ogre from Skinny Puppy. All amazing people, and people who got me into the music I listen to now because of my love of horror. There's an article on the movie Stoker, which I've not seen but really, really want to. Here's the article that I bought this for. They Sold Their Souls for Rock and Roll, which is all about different bands that have been influenced by horror. It goes back to Screaming Lord Sutch from the UK, Count 5, Black Sabbath, obviously. There's the movie and the band there. Obviously, you've got Alice Cooper. It's showing how he was influenced by Whatever Happened to Baby Jane there. Kiss, of course. In like late 70s, early 80s, bands like the Cramps and the Misfits doing the horror punk and psychobilly thing and being heavily 50s horror influenced and amazing. And you've got amazing, wonderful bands such as Gwar, who want to kill the human race, and that's why we love them, but they're influenced by old horror comics and Lovecraft. And then there's Rob Zombie with the cast of his Halloween remake up there, Mr. Marilyn Manson, and a poster for Lords of Salem, and a review of Rob Zombie's Lords of Salem. There's an article on the Satanic Panic. Lots of great stuff talking about some of the horrible stuff that happened during the 80s Satanic Panic, people who were punished who didn't deserve it, just the whole scare of, oh my god, everybody's turning into a Satanist now. Over here you've got a book that I would love to get, which is Dan O'Bannon's Guide to Screenplay Structure. I love movies like Alien and Return of the Living Dead, obviously, and I'm trying to write horror movies and just movies in general, so I definitely want to read that. There's an article on subtle horror versus just flat-out gore, and it doesn't really condemn one or the other, but it does really just sort of show how the subtle stuff can be scarier, as fun as the gore is, which I completely agree with. Most of my favorite horror movies are not extremely gory or graphic, even though I like some gore movies, but most of the gore movies I like are sort of fun, campy, ridiculous gore movies, but it is all a matter of taste. Some Skinny Puppy album covers and an interview with the artist who made them. Interview with Kirk Hammett about his Too Much Horror Business book, which I own and I love, and the guitar I own is a Kirk Hammett designed Vincent Price guitar. At least I think he designed it. It is in the same vein as his line of Universal Monster guitars, but that guitar and that book are part of why I found Metallica and got more into metal as I went on. There he is with his amazing Mummy guitar. And then there's this article, I think it's an interview with Ogre from Skinny Puppy, and if you don't know, Skinny Puppy are a industrial band with some very confrontational graphic live shows and videos, and they're very harsh and creepy while still being extremely dancey music. And Ogre from Skinny Puppy, if you didn't know, was in Repo the Genetic Opera and The Devil's Carnival, and he was awesome in both of those. Since it's more about music and horror, here's some like science about why certain sounds are scary, which is cool. And that's that issue. There's the back. Diabolique is awesome. I don't own any other issues, but I am subscribed to the newsletter that they do, which is really, really good. Every few weeks it'll send you just a big list of articles that you can be linked to about all kinds of horror and cult cinema and just really insightful, interesting things. I've discovered all kinds of stuff I've never heard of just because of the Diabolique newsletter. I really want to actually be subscribed to the actual magazine now, just because their content is really good. Freaky Monsters, which is obviously very, very in the same vein as Famous Monsters of Filmland, but I bought this one because it's got our wonderful Vincent Price on the cover. If it isn't very evident at this point from the Bloody Sunday video I did already, I really, really like Vincent Price, and then it's only made better by the fact you've got Karloff and Lugosi in The Black Cat on the back. This movie is a masterpiece. Please watch this if you haven't. Has barely anything to do with the Poe story that it's supposedly based on, other than that there's a black cat in it, but it's really good, and especially dark for the 30s. There's a cult, somebody gets skinned, it's dark, and it's really, really good. But this magazine is all about golden age horror, like 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and going back to like 20s silent stuff, which is some of my favorite stuff as well. There is, in these articles, a little bit of like putting down of modern horror, all kinds of jokes about this is the golden age of horror and all the other movies are just gory nonsense. And I'm kind of like, I like both, but it is really cool to have a magazine that's happening these days that focuses way more on classic 30s, 40s, 20s, 50s. I'm not doing that in order. Horror. There's an article on Man-Made Monster with Lon Chaney Jr., which is awesome. This title is dumb, but I love it. Faust and Furious, about F.W. Murnau's 1926 version of Faust. This is cool. It's talking about how the Bald Mountain scene in Faust inspired the animation of Night on Bald Mountain in Fantasia, which I still love that scene. I'm always disappointed when it gets cut into by the Happy Heavenly. I don't even remember what that piece is called. I just like the Night on Bald Mountain part. But of course it's Disney, so it has to end with the forces of good coming in, but I like Night on Bald Mountain. Here's a lovely still of Barbara Steele in, I think it's Pit and the Pendulum. Might not be. Actually, I think that, is that Nightmare Castle? Okay, it's got an anagram down there, which is altering matches, so it's Nightmare Castle. I don't know why I thought it was Pit and the Pendulum. Nightmare Castle is really low budget, but really, really good. There's Lon Chaney in The Unholy Three. I haven't seen that yet, but it looks awesome. Wonderful Vincent in Mask of the Red Death, one of my favorites of his, along with Pit and the Pendulum. A freaky look at monsters and their music. There's Vincent again as Dr. Phibes, and there's Bela Lugosi as Igor, playing his little, it says it's a gimshorn, a multi-tonal folk instrument with a flute-like sound. It apparently sounds like an oboe, which is not what it is at all in the movie. There's Phantom of the Paradise and a bunch of different Phantom of the Operas, well, a couple Phantoms, and then Vincent in House of Usher. All wonderful. Biography of Karloff. I'm spending too much time on this magazine again. Wolfman, and some ads. So that's this. This is awesome. Freaky Monsters. It's a classic horror exclusive magazine, and it tends to be kind of snobbish about what makes it better than what it calls gore or just modern gory horror movies, but pretty fun. And then you've got a couple very battered issues of Rue Morgue, which I desperately need to be subscribed to because I love these. Obviously, you've got Piranha on the cover and some ads for Survival of the Dead, which I have not seen on the back. There's an ad for Afterlife with Christina Ricci, which I've been meaning to see for a very long time. I don't even know if it's good, but I want to see it. It's got a section on needful things. All of these look wonderful. That guitar, that's gonna hurt if I rest it on my knee, but I still want it really bad. The article on Piranha, Malicious Fishes, and some talk about the Piranha remake, which I have yet to see, which, you know, fun. Piranha 3D. Should probably watch that. Here's some really beautiful artwork from Harry Clark. He's done all these really beautiful pieces of art for Edgar Allan Poe stuff. So there's an article on him. A little thing about 1800s dark art, periodical provocations. Thing about a documentary about Count Gordeval. I haven't watched him a lot, but he's a really fun horror host. And then you've got another page here of other horror hosts. I watch Svengoolie religiously because he's what I get, but then you've got Penny Dreadful, who looks cool, Mr. Lobo, Dr. Sarcophagi, Carlos Borloff, and Dr. Gangrene. All of them are really cool. There is a documentary called American Scary, which is all about horror hosts, and I think all of these folks are in there, and it's just great. If you've never watched like a late night horror host show, that is a beautiful thing. I need this Barnabas Collins because Barnabas, there's apparently a review of a Twilight movie in here. Why? I don't know. Some reviews of other movies. Lots of really cool ads in this. There's an ad down here for Aggressive Tendencies, which is all about punk and hardcore. So there's lots of things about like horror adjacent stuff, even if it's not horror specifically. Full Moon. I need to watch more of their movies. There's a section on comic book reviews with a Dark Shadows comic that I need because I'm way too obsessed with Dark Shadows. Some book reviews. The Gourmet, who talks all about gore films, which are not really my thing, but hey. Audio Drone, which is all about horror music that's coming out. So there's the soundtrack to Theater of Blood up there, which I just did a Bloody Sunday on. That movie's awesome. You've got some reviews of some movie soundtracks, some metal, some rock, some industrial, even some like horror country stuff, but this is a great way to find new music. There's Grave, who are classic Swedish death metal. I love them. A thing about The Body, who are apparently a metal band. I never really read too heavily into that when I first got this, but now I'm going to have to go back to that. Play Dead, which is all about horror games. Some more ads. And a few other things, but Rue Morgue's just awesome and a lot of fun. One more issue that I got, which has got John Waters on the cover, which is amazing. Some really cool artwork here. Really, the cover is falling off. And Vincent Price. If it has Vincent Price in it, I will probably get it if I can. There's some really cool ads in this thing, just all kinds of underground horror. Here's a little example of that there. And then you've got this big interview with John Waters talking about the way horror has influenced his filmmaking. I haven't watched a lot of his stuff, but he's really cool. This wonderful quote, which is Vincent Price, "I'm still trying to steal his career," which is, I think, what we're all trying to do. If you're not, you're doing something wrong, because everybody should be trying to copy Vincent Price. The drag queen Peaches Christ talking about her favorite horror moments in John Waters' movie, all of which are a little bit too messed up for me personally, but you know, people like different things. To Vincent with Love, which is, I think, the main reason I got this. This is Victoria Price celebrating, what's it say? Victoria Price helps us celebrate her father's 100th birthday, along with 13 horror artists who have created original portraits of the icon. Look at this beauty. Hymns from the House of Horror, which is a playlist that Rue Morgue has put together of different horror-themed music. Lots of great stuff in here. I'm just going to list off really good bands that I've listened to that I really like from here. Guar, obviously. Calabrese, I really like Calabrese. Awesome horror punk with some like goth and metal stuff thrown in. They're really, really fun. All of these bands are good, but I'm just gonna pick because we'll be here for 2 more hours if I go into everything and gush about everything, because I will. Blood Ceremony, who are like 70s style occult rock. It says somewhere between Black Sabbath, Jethro Tull, Sabbath Assembly, and Black Widow, which is accurate. It's really cool, like hammer horror occult stuff mixed with 70s psychedelia, metal, and prog. It's really cool. A section on reissues. I see Inferno down there. That movie is far from perfect, but I like it. This section on Diabolique, which I finally got around to watching this year. I love this movie, but the ending is so sad and unsatisfying to me. I should have mentioned that there's a travelogue of terror section that talks about different locations, and of course I picked this magazine to show that when it's talking about stuff from House of Dark Shadows, because everything's about Dark Shadows today. This one's got a review of a Pentagram album, classic doom metal. And over here there's an ad for a Nosferatu graphic novel, which I really want now because I have to own everything related to vampires, apparently. Section called Classic Cut, which has a classic movie in it. I don't know anything really about All Night Long 2 Atrocity or the original All Night Long, but that's there. Alright, before I forget, there is one magazine that I forgot to take off my shelf, and it's this lovely, don't know if you can read that, but it's the 100-issue special edition of Rue Morgue. A lot of stuff about the wonderful Christopher Lee in this one. There he is in Sleepy Hollow and House of the Long Shadows, both fantastic. And then more Christopher Lee in the back, and all throughout this one. This one's especially pretty, so I'm not going to spoil it for you in case you want it. And also I'm tired. Rue Morgue is awesome, and I have only just begun with the horror magazines. I'm gonna have to take this off, because it is, despite being December, kind of hot in here, and I don't know why. These magazines are ones that one of my friends and a friend of my family's gave to me, which I'm still shocked that he did, because he loves, like, classic horror almost as much as I do, but he's like, you love this stuff. I'm gonna trust you with this stuff, so I'm honored to own this. So, Cult Movies magazine, issue with Frankenstein and the Mummy's Curse in it. And here you've got lots of ads. This one's in black and white. That's just a wonderful picture. Merry Christmas, everyone. A book-length biography on Karloff, which is awesome. Yeah, it's a book-length biography on Karloff, so it takes up a good bit of the magazine. For a magazine that focuses on, like, classic stuff, there's a lot of really, like, risque ads in this thing, just for lots of sleazy exploitation stuff, whereas this thing just tends to focus on more classic horror stuff. The Acker Monster Chronicles, special column by Forrest J. Ackerman, formerly of Famous Monsters of Filmland. Wonderful, wonderful stuff, because it's Forrest J. Ackerman. Dracula's Last Hurrah, interviews with the cast and company of Bela Lugosi's Last Lost Dracula. So I think this is the final stage production of Dracula that he did, which is amazing. Lots of great stuff in all these magazines, but really long, detailed things about Karloff and Lugosi in here. Not as pretty to look at, but lots of great content. There's Cheney and Shemp. I don't know what the context for that is, but it looks entertaining. It says it's a movie called San Antonio Rose, so I'll have to look into that. But yeah, not as much to look at there, but lots of great content. There's The Ghost of Frankenstein and The Mummy's Curse there on the back. Cult Movies magazine. Then you've got these magazines, which are the reason that I did this video in the first place, which is Hammer Horror. This one's on Frankenstein Created Woman, primarily. These magazines focus predominantly on British horror, especially the classic stuff, but it's all British horror, which is really, really cool. You've got Clive Barker's Hellbreed there, which is, I actually think it's a Clive Barker magazine. I don't know. That sounds cool. There's Christopher Lee, who is pretty much right up there with Vincent Price for me. Letters to the magazine section, which is called Satanic Rites, because of course it is. Section on the actress who plays the female creation in Frankenstein Created Woman. It's been a while since I've seen that, but I need to again, because Hammer. Here's a whole thing on the female creations of the Doctor. These magazines always will focus on one particular movie or a couple particular movies, and it'll have a page like this, and then little synopsis of the story with little bios of the characters. Always a classic Hammer movie. Lots of great background on the making of said movie. And then, you know, more review, critique type stuff. And then they'll always pick a classic scene with some lines from it, from each movie that they do. There's Christopher Lee again, he's beautiful. Can't show you every Christopher Lee in these Hammer magazines, though, because he's everywhere, because he's Christopher Lee. There's another one on the Creeping Flesh, which I have not seen. Some reviews of horror video releases, and yeah, some more ads and other stuff, but that's one issue of Hammer Horror that is awesome. This one, which is the one that prompted the video in the first place, which is the Curse of the Mummy's Shroud issue. It's got the same Hellbreed ad in it. Gonna be speeding through these a little bit more. It's the thing about A Feast at Midnight, which is like more a drama about British schoolboys, but they decided to try to find the most menacing person possible to cast as the headmaster, and of course they picked Christopher Lee. Reviews of TV horror, these looked really cool. Some stuff on Eddie Powell, the stunt double for Christopher Lee. Obviously there's a section on the Mummy's Shroud that I'm going to speed through, because honestly the Mummy movies, both the Universal and Hammer ones, are the most boring out of all of those classic monsters to me. They'll have a section on like early Hammer movies before horror became their forte, which is really cool. I'm not going to go into detail with every magazine like I have been just now because, oh my god, I own too much stuff. I own way too many copies of this Hammer horror magazine. So you've got the first issue, which is on The Curse of Frankenstein, the first one, the ultimate movie that started it all with Hammer horror, pretty much. Rasputin the Mad Monk, Dracula, Prince of Darkness. I like how I'm speeding through the Dracula movies, which are my favorites. Dracula Rises from the Grave. One on the Quatermass experiment, which is interesting because that's pre-Curse of Frankenstein. It's like a sci-fi thriller thing. I know that this is one that John Carpenter saw when he was little and absolutely terrified him. I was kind of bored by it, to be honest, but it's a decent film. And then a little collector's edition. Collector's special. That's my horror magazines. With those, I've stored my horror comics. So I've got this thing I bought over the summer, which I bought because you've got all of these classic monsters on the cover, but I was disappointed to find out that that's pretty much just a background because Villain just sort of starts hiding out in like a costume store. There's Freddy Krueger from in there. So I'd hoped it was a supernatural horror thing, but it wasn't. But this is actually a local Louisville, Kentucky magazine, and it's dark and actiony, and this guy who they thought was dead who comes back for revenge reminds me of The Crow a little bit, but I've only read one issue and there's not a lot of story in it, so maybe I'll go into it more, but it was decent, just not what I thought it was, not what I was hoping for. So I bought this when I bought the Fangoria. This is kind of a horror magazine and kind of a comic book. The Tomb of Dracula. This is a bunch of Dracula comics. Kind of pulpy, campy, but I enjoy that. And this one, he fights against the Dimensional Man. Then you've got a couple more stories, like Court of the Undead, some talks about the making of the Frank Langella Dracula, and an examination of the remake of Nosferatu. So it's really a horror magazine and a collection of comics for people who love all things Dracula, which I couldn't be more happy about. I need more of these, please. And then I have just a few things that I picked up from that same comic book store last year in October. These are just little things from their Halloween Comics Fest where you just got a few things that you wanted because they were free. They're tiny little excerpty type things, but they're good. Junji Ito's Frankenstein, which is of course done in the manga style with gorgeous artwork. John Constantine Hellblazer. I honestly don't know a lot about John Constantine, but this thing is written by Neil Gaiman and illustrated by Dave McKean, so I had to have it. And then Hellboy in The Phantom Hand and the Kelpie, and Hellboy is always fun. I rushed through at the end, but I don't want to do an hour-long video, which is basically what this is already, at least until I edit it down. But those are my horror monster magazines and my horror comics, so I hope you enjoyed watching this. I definitely recommend checking all of these things out rather than just letting me rant about them to you. So thank you for checking out this video. I hope you check out more of my stuff and check out all of this stuff, and I'll hopefully see you in another video. Bye.